4:32. And do you need us to do a roll call?
No, go ahead and call it off. I think that's more.
Okay. Alan? Present. Bruce?
Present.
Catherine?
Present.
Melissa? Yeah. Eric?
Present.
Linda?
Present.
Tom?
Present.
And then Kelly? So we present. And then we have public invited to be heard.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name's Edward Massey. I was just interested in the board, so I was leaving this note here for you. So
Yes.
I wanted to attend a meeting, see in person, rather than just reading the agendas.
And then we have our minutes from September 18th. Are there any revisions, comments? Is there a motion to approve? First, second. All in favor? Yes. And then we're ready to move on to accessions.
No pictures this time. Sorry, guys. It's just been really, really busy. And some of this are kind of like larger things that really let me scan properly and all of that. Our first item is a t-shirt. We actually offered a whole pile of t-shirts from the water resources team, commemorating this children's water festival they had in the 2000s. We issued one little pile to kind of earmark that to memorialize that event in a way. One that was in good shape, because all these have been worn and stained. So this one was in good shape and had an interesting kind of like cartoon to it. It also had a date on it and all of them. So this will be one of the things that we Eric and I visited the daughter of Sue Weiss, who was a painter in Longmont.
Yeah, she stopped painting. Just passed away a few years ago. Stopped painting. I don't know if any of you were on the board, but Susan Weiss was on the advisory board, but this is her mother, Sue.
So she offered us some artwork, and we chose the two following: snow flurries and desert landscape. They are
Does she paint her a note, like on her works?
Well, so Susan was a curator at the Art Institute of Chicago. And she is writing the catalog or SNA of her mother's paintings. So it's sort of, on one hand, I trust her curatorial instincts. On the other hand, it is her mother. So there's a little bit of but I certainly think, in looking at her work, it's very high quality. A lot of it is inspired by this area, both the ones that we took were things that were inspired by this area. And she certainly sold, she was not just painting for her own pleasure. She was
She's a work artist, right? And would we display them somewhere? Like, what is the plan for them?
We are in the early stages, really, of building a local art collection. So we have one other collection of local art that we did display selections of in the Portal Gallery. So we don't have anything definitive, but I can definitely see once we've completed the expansion, we've got a little more flexibility in our gallery space that we do another like historic local art show periodically.
And these are small, they're like this size, they're even like in matting, they're this size of the actual paintings are about this. And they're not framed, so they're not gonna take up much room in storage. I would also add that as in some of the background in art history, the kind of women's art, local women's art that is post-war is sort of this moment of like, oh, women have this time, this free time to pursue things, and some of them pursue things whether they were actually making money from it. Her family owned a sheep farm in the Central Longmont area, and you know, we probably will also get some things regarding that farm as well. So there's a decent connection to Longmont.
Yeah, they live out kind of west of the city of Longmont, south of Page. We received an offer of photographs and newspaper clippings relating to Attilio and Lange, also known as Bianca Baggiore. They were opera singers that toured internationally in the 1920s. Who retired here in Longmont. They built 2125 Greenview Lane. I thought these were interesting people that were really cool photos, and she's all kind of dressed up in opera gear. They didn't really perform in Longmont, unfortunately, but they had this really interesting story of traveling all over the world, and some of the newspaper clippings are in Italian. Yeah, just interesting. Also, the outfits that Bianca / Blanche is wearing in them, really great examples of 1930s clothing.
Candidate outfits.
I know, right? Some of the newspaper clippings announced the estate sale, and so died and listed all this like awesome stuff. This was a very large donation. These are all items that have come down through the descendants of the Coffin, Pennick, Smith, Large families. So there's a direct connection to the Coffin, that were early settlers here in Longmont. Most of the items are all more to the 1930s and 40s. So there's a whole packet of photos of the 75th anniversary parade. There is also corresponding film, which has been digitized on CD of that parade, which is pretty interesting to see all those basically pictures come to life. There are some pictures of a large snowstorm, of flood, events in Roosevelt Park, family members. There's a great photo of the prisoner of war camp. That was at the Great Western Hotel that we hadn't seen before. There are also reels of the Pet and Doll Parade. There's one in the 1930s where the little kid is dressed up as the, what's the striker's name?
Let's see. Striker.
Sit down striker.
Johnson.
Genevieve Johnson. Of course, that helped me date the film. Of course, that must have been happening that year. Little kids who didn't dress up as her. There is also some really awesome scrapbooks. Mildred Smith, her father owned a monument, like a gravestone company out by Mountview. Cemetery. And
where Walgreens is now, where their monument shop was.
And there's pictures of that. But she attended CU and kept everything that she collected. So there's a lot of things related to various social groups, concerts at the Mackey Auditorium. There was one from Helen Keller games of the Royal Moment. So just lots of really cool, interesting things. And then she also, I think this is the one earlier, when she was in high school or something. 1909 scrapbook, which it's like a composition book that she's kind of all of these like magazine like drawings of women, like fashion drawings. There's all these ideas about how to care for a baby, and like what's in style, what's no longer in style. She can see all these little handwritten notes next to what she's cut out. And then there is a photocopied diary from Ellen Koppenpenning. It's all handwritten, and it's like we don't know where the original is. They didn't know where the original was either. But it's very neat. This is not something that we already had. So I would be looking for someone to help transcribe that, because it is all in beautiful cursive. And also great for photocopy form too. So it'll be a challenge to read that. And last but not least, we had a woman come in with, this was her grandmother, Elizabeth Connor, bathing suit. It's a big, heavy wool, navy black, kind of a dress and pantaloons, and then 2 sets of stockings, one white and one dark blue. And they're kind of like hand-knitted, they're very beautiful. Great example of what women wore bathing in the early 20th century. She was born in Vermont, but she moved here in her youth, went to Longmont High. Of course, we don't have a picture of her, but, or at least in the outfit, but she did have a lot. As far as we know, we don't have a bathing suit of this style. Any questions about the way?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd love to see some.
I know. Welcome to come upstairs afterward, and I can pull out
here?
some of it. Yeah, everything. All of the stuff is here in my office, archival area.
I have a question about the film. What is that?
They're actually physical film reels in the places.
What do we do with that? It's hold on, it's film reels. We get them converted.
He converted them about in 2010, and did admit that he didn't use the highest quality, most expensive, and also was 2010. So he
So you did it.
did. So there, in this is 2 CDs. Now, granted, he also said that he basically took a whole box of these films. Well, he only gave us 3, but initially in 2010, he had a whole box that someone looked at some just and he just brought it to this digitization place, and they just did it in order of which they pulled it out of the box. So it is a little bit like Whiplash of Olivia Parade, and then clearly like Easter footage of the family in front of their house. And then it will be like a road trip out east somewhere, and then like a parade again, and it will be maybe the same parade. So we have to kind of piece out exactly what is in that video. And having the original film, if we wanted to do another digitization effort, having the original film to go back to this is great.
Do you remember, is it 8 millimeter or 16? That's bigger the film, more higher quality. Yeah, I think if we were ever want to use it, is it part of the program? Have it professionally digitized by a commercial place. It's better quality. But for just reference, it's great to have already digitized.
Yeah.
See what it really is.
Well, what's the grade?
Luckily, these we checked. These are
Safety
film,
film.
which is extremely long lasting. So, if it was nitrate film, it was the precursor of safety film, then we would have to get it digitized. And then we have a freezer for nitrate film because it's actually a fire hazard to have store. Yeah, but safety film is it's actually polyester, so that's one of the most eternal plastics.
Are there any other questions, or is there a motion to accept these accessions? Second by Bruce, second. Catherine, all in favor? Unanimous. And we'll move on to the report of the director.
All right, I'll hit a few highlights. Let's see, under administration, I did note that the 2025 city budget was a challenging budget across the board, and unfortunately for the museum as well. We were not successful in getting funding to support the operations aspect of the museum expansion. So we will certainly be back in 2025 with hopefully our expansion will be 2026. It'll be a more compelling case. In fact, we're part of the general fund, the largest city fund, and there were no positions approved citywide in that fund. So it's certainly disappointing, but it's also not a feeling of the city doesn't support the museum. It's just, it was a very challenging year. So we're going to continue to look for other sources to support that. We're going to be applying for a grant for exhibits, and certainly be continuing to raise funds around exhibits, some other sources for staffing, and hopefully city staffing for that. Let's go down to exhibitions. So one of the really key areas in our expansion is our children's gallery. And our exhibits team is really hard at work now on developing prototypes for some of the interactives that will be in that gallery. So they have built a number, and what we might do at a subsequent meeting is actually have you all go up to the exhibits area and try a few of those out. Fun, different interactives that they're trying, and they're actually going to be doing some prototyping in the Discovery Days classroom next week with 2 to 5 year olds, just to see how they interact with some of these hands-on exhibits that we're trying. You want to
Sure. If you haven't gotten to look at this exhibit on flood, do so today, because next week it will be gone. Allie and I are working on photo shows. If you've been in this room prior to this exhibit, there's framed photos from the historic photo collection. We have identified a few animals from the Times Hall collection, so it should be a fun one. We're working on that now. And I did a lot of historic walking tours last month, and today I did one for the city staff for Walktober, which is a health initiative to get people outdoors and walking. I'll do another one next week too. I attended a conference of the American Association of the State of History. It was held in Mobile, Alabama. This is at the beginning of September. Got to network with a lot of other local history organizations and state organizations. There was a showing of the 250th, 150th commissioners from all the different states. Colorado being one of the biggest showing and really have a lot of things already together. It being extra special because it's also the 150th anniversary of the state. And we just got to learn more about what museums are doing and best practices and all of that. I'm currently also working on the very embryonic stages of planning the new history exhibit for the expansion is complete. If you have any ideas or opinions on that, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Question, are there a bunch of exhibits that are going to
No, there's no other 150, but everyone is gathering for this semi-centennial.
Semi-centennial. 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is the big nationwide one. But yeah, a lot of the Western states are kind of, well, we'll figure it out later. But Colorado, since we got the double anniversary.
Yeah, it's basically us and like all of the eastern seaboard. So Rhode Island was there, New Jersey was there, Massachusetts. So they have so many museums after the Revolution that it's behooves them to celebrate or commemorate. There's been a distinction of we don't necessarily just celebrate in the way that they did in 1976, but commemorate and acknowledge the not so great parts of history as well as
Under education, I don't know if any of you got a chance to attend the Dia de Muertos celebration in downtown on Saturday, but a huge success. Our count around 5,000 people attended. So by far our biggest event we do each year, and it's headed up by Ann Mackay in our education department. And then as you're coming in, you saw the exhibition in the atrium, and then November 2nd, actual Day of the Dead, we will have Noche de Museo in the auditorium with several performers. So it's a great opportunity to see that and close out the Day of the Dead celebrations.
and also the mural we voted on a few months ago is now hanging on the wall over there.
So yes, see a newly accession piece installed and on view. With a huge altar in front of it, built by the people who created the original mural, plus their family and friends.
So they were teenagers in the 90s and now they're
Scroll down to places. Now, photos. So, Art and Public Places, along with education, headed up a community paint by numbers project that was done in both Art Walk and Rhythm at Roosevelt. So, see the photos. They did 5 different canvases using the same design in different colorways, and then they were painted by the community at these events. It was a really fun community project. One of the things I really liked is a lot of times when we're out at these festivals, kids will come up and do whatever activity it is, but adults will be like, oh, well, that's what kids have to do that. But this one, kids would come up and do it, and adults would be like, oh, well, this is a piece of art. I can do that. And of course, some people were like, oh, art, I can't do that. I'm like, look, come on, it's paint by numbers. Here. And so people just really, they got into it. Some kids got really into like, I want to do this entire huge area. It was a really fun activity that I think we will probably reprise for some of our future festivals. Let's see. Auditorium programming. We have kicked off our fall programming. We'll have tomorrow night is in-car program on atmospheric rivers. It's a free program. Check it out. And then we started with free concerts out in our courtyard. There's also been several paid programs and some collaborations with the library as well. Development, as I mentioned, we're working on grants and also our next big push on the expansion campaign will be our end of the year appeal. Colorado Gives Day is December 10th, so that will culminate our year end. Got the data on attendance. You see the difference, say, in August. Lego drew 3.5 times the audience that our agriculture did in August of 23. So that's one of the reasons we're so excited about having a dedicated children's gallery is we feel like that's a need in this community. And in fact, it came up in another meeting I had today.
Sorry.
We get
Go fast.
And then I think the last thing I will just mention under volunteer and evaluation coordination is the volunteer appreciation basket. Many of you were able to pick up your basket. Yeah, that was all coordinated by Courtney Fletcher, our volunteer evaluation coordinator. So thanks for all that you do on board. We don't say thank you enough, so thanks again. Really appreciate what you do and your role out there. Who's my report? Anybody have any questions?
Under administration, level 1.3, it talks about you were hoping to submit the phase 2 of the museum expansion in a few days. So I just wondered, are we ever going to see that as an advisory board?
Oh, in terms of, I can pull up the plans on that here. So it might take a little while to get there. We'll work on getting that downloaded, but I'll walk you through the basic expansion.
Well, sometimes it's just helpful when we're talking to people in the community to have a better idea of what's going on as far as the expansion. And I know it's changed a few times.
Yeah, we're pretty dialed in at this point since it's been submitted once to the city.
Yeah.
Now it becomes very challenging to make big changes because then the city planning is like, oh, this is different than we saw last time.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing now is at least what it will be. We will send it out to bid probably early next year, and when it's come back high, then we may have to do some rethinking. But at this point, our plan is.
And then under development, what's our remaining goal?
We've got about 900,000.
900,000.
We don't have maintenance funds to support expansion. We can still receive the expansion.
Yeah, we will. Our plan is certainly I think it's unlikely that the city would not fund kind of the really basic fundamental operations where our challenge is funding for the additional staff that we would need to fully operate. So probably we would do, rather than changing exhibits more frequently, we would be changing them, like we do now, once a year. And maybe having times when the gallery is dark, capacity to do additional staff. I'm still, very hopeful that we will get staff operate the building once it's open. Let's see. Continue on while my computer is connected to the big screen.
Do we have any unfinished business that we need to address?
I don't know, I have a question on the word list. But I thought we were going to get some financial numbers this last month. No, wasn't that actually just the budget? Maybe I was wrong, maybe this is the wrong time of the year for that.
What do you want to see, like current, 2024 budget or the proposed 2025? That's still working its way through city
I
council.
guess current.
Okay.
So we're this goes back a couple of months ago. We had a decision to make on whether to purchase a cane here in San for $800. And I don't have a feel for what that, how to say yes or no to that. Obviously, we have the space in the storehouse, but is $800 a lot or a little? And I guess what I'd like is an overview of our situation and know how to make some assistance in making this.
All right. Well, one thing I can tell you is our total budget is about $2.7 million. So $800 is not a lot in that overall scheme.
And I guess I would like to see what comprises that $2.7 million. What kind of expenses?
And the budget we used to purchase the things, it's not really a direct budget, it's basically funds from the sale of deaccession items over many, many years.
So we're very great opportunity for $7,000.
That'd be challenging.
But I would like to have
But
an overview of helping me decide how to go.
Some laptops are very happy to connect to the screen easily.
Well, you could always put it in the packet for purchase.
So yeah, I can definitely share our budget, and I can share where we are as of October 7th. Last time I
Like
read.
and
And the plans, yeah.
it just helps as a board member, I think, to have some basic information, so when you're talking to the public or friends or whoever, you feel a little bit more informed than they are.
That's really wrong.
And it's a way to help promote the museum too. I think. Be positive about what we're planning to do, and what it'll hopefully provide for things like that.
And then we had under new business, the American Alliance Museum survey awards.
Yeah, so we can do that as does everyone have the paper version of that in front of you? So this is an annual survey. We have participated now for the last 4 years. It's done, so the first page is the title, and then they have, there should be a copy in that packet. You're welcome
Oh,
to
here,
take a look
I
at
have 2 copies.
Oh, sweet. So on page 2, it just kind of describes the overall purpose of this survey is to understand who the audience is, how our museum compares to other museums, and then there's kind of a broader look at society and how museums are responding to issues in the community and how the community and both general audience and specific museum-going audience are comparing. Page 3, so 202 museums across the country participated, the largest number to date, and see that we are generally considered under this category, we're probably a history museum, although they also have a category of general museums, which is really what we better fit in. We cross multiple disciplines. And one thing to note on this slide is that this survey is distributed primarily to people who are pretty connected with museum art. We send it out to our email list. So it's not necessarily interviewing people walking into the museum. It's not interviewing people walking into the museum for the first time, because they're doing it nationwide. They do it as an email survey, and you'll see that in some of the results that they reflect more of the very frequent, very connected visitors rather than the more casual visitors, and they address that. So then the next slide talks about, because they realize they are getting a sample that is very active museum goers, they also do a separate survey nationally of just U.S. adults, and they ask the same questions. And so there's a comparison. We had 227 people respond to a good sample size. And if you go to the age of the respondents, so they give 4 different data groups. So the brown is all people who responded to the survey sent out by museums. The blue is people specifically responding to Longmont. The green is that general museum category of museums that encompass art and history. And then the gray is the broader U.S. population sample. So one of the things that you see on this one is that we are similar to many other museums across the country in that the people responding to the survey tend to skew older than the general population. Almost 40% of our respondents were age 70 and over, compared with about 9% of the general population. Next slide is about parental status. Again, we see that we tend to, what appears in this survey are folks that may have had children, but they're now out of the home, and the general population much higher than that. Next slide is, I think, one of the really interesting ones about the impact that COVID continues to have on museum visitation. So you'll see the 2020 survey, I think they don't know if they mentioned it in these slides, but they did that survey in like February of 2020. So it is sort of the perfect snapshot pre-COVID, because it was completed just before COVID. Great. And then we see, of course, the tremendous drop-off in 2021, and then the build back up. But one of the things that's interesting, if you look at this 4 times per year, so your frequent museum goers are still not back to where they were pre-COVID. And that's really the difference. Most everybody else, the 2 to 3 times a year, once a year, those folks, yeah, they're back even above where they were pre-COVID. But your really frequent visitors are still not quite back. So museums particularly, and I think we are seeing it not so much in our gallery visitation, but in our auditorium programs, where we tend to see folks that come for mini programs. There's not coming as frequently as they were. Go to the next slide, talk a little bit about why they visit. So again, this compares all museum goers in Longmont, and then general museum goers. Longmont generally is similar in most categories. They're a little more likely to come to us because of interest in learning and curiosity, and a little less likely to come for respite. And that is not surprising. Folks that come for respite to a museum are often coming either to botanic gardens or an art museum or something where they sit and commune with nature or art, versus art museum. It's a little more active and doesn't tend as much to respite. Next slide, about what the museum does well. So a couple of areas here where we are significantly different than other museums. People really like our programs. They really like our special events, again, compared to the broader museum sample and the general sample. And they also feel like we contribute very strongly to the quality of life. And I think that's a great point to make if you're talking to folks in the community and they're saying, why does the city have a museum? Why does it support it? People see the Longmont Museum as contributing to the quality of life in our community. On the next slide, we see that people really, the major one is the third one over exhibits changing more. That's something that we've struggled with because we have only the one gallery, and so it can only change not many times a year. So with our expansion, we will have more opportunities to change exhibits. On the next slide, repeat visitation rates. So on this one, we started our survey the first year that COVID was really heavily hitting us. So we've seen, very steady increases in repeat visitation coming off of COVID. So the 4 times a year folks are now back above 40%. And the people that visit less than once a year went from over half down now to 5%. So we're seeing a very active part of our audience in this survey. On the next slide, what inspires repeat museum visits? There's interest in something new. That's probably that, and seasonal events are the 2 that really stand out from the general museum responses. Interestingly enough, bringing out of town guests, we are a little bit below what other museums are. So that's something to explore. And then the next slide is about kind of a broader aspect of society that the survey of museum goers has been exploring for a number of years, which is around attitudes toward inclusion. So looking at all museums, looking at U.S. adults, we see that they've grouped kind of folks into several categories. About half of people are broadly inclusive, feel like museums should present inclusive content. Another group that varies a little bit, but it's around 20 to 25%, are generally, well, we like the status quo. Maybe they lean a little bit more or less toward providing more inclusive content. And then there is a group of about 20% of the audience that is generally opposed to more of the inclusive content that museums tend to provide. So, for example, our duality exhibit on indigenous art would be an example of that type of content we're trying to bring in. Longmont tends to skew more inclusive than the broader U.S. population, museum goers generally, which I think gives us a little more flexibility to provide inclusive content. And as the folks who do these surveys point out, you may get pushback, but realize it's coming from a small part of your overall audience. In our case, about 16% of our audience has these real feelings of we shouldn't be providing this inclusive content. We always, every year when we do Day of the Dead, there's a few people that say, why is the museum doing Day of the Dead? Why don't you celebrate other cultures? And it's like, well, celebrate a lot of cultures, but Day of the Dead, we have got a lot of history here. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing that. And so it's just helpful to realize this is, they may be a loud voice sometimes, but they are a small percentage of the audience. And then the final slide is just kind of summarizing some of the effects of COVID, as I mentioned before. For the most part, things have rebounded, but there is a group of regular visitors that probably aren't visiting quite as frequently. And then some final thoughts around that inclusion and generally the sense that our audience does welcome more inclusive content, providing broad perspectives. And I also just wanted to mention, the full slide deck is 125 pages. Didn't want to go through all of it, but if anyone is interested, I'm certainly happy to share it. There's a lot more information in that about all the questions that were in the survey. Let's see if you want to go on Teams and we can pull up. Go under the museum staff. Yeah, museum staff, and scroll down to MDP, health plan, and under files. Senza documents. Senza is our architecture firm. And then 50% construction costs. And then we'll do the 50% CD costs. So, yep. do the page. And again, 126 pages. Let's go. Okay, here's a good one. So,
Where is that?
Joanne, do you want to just, the light switch is right behind you? So the part in gray is the existing museum. The part in white is the expansion. And you can see that we are also, then that sort of gray speckled area is the part of the site that will be affected by the expansion. So it will impact our front entrance, our current entry drive, and a portion of our parking lot as well. So once construction starts, we'll lose about half of our parking for the period of construction. So we are working on to try and mitigate what's going to be expanding the dirt.
Is that what this is here?
So yeah, that part that goes north off the page is dirt.
And what's the timeframe for completion?
So we are hoping, and this again depends on completing fundraising and getting through all the city approvals that we
Well, I mean, once you start.
we would start in construction in May of 2025, and their estimate is about 14 months construction time. So finish up late summer of 2026.
Is that a single story?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Might go through to a ways down for. Oh, this one actually isn't too bad. It's a little chunked up with architectural stuff. So expansion, basically right along here. So this is the existing building. This one here. We will be adding on to our lobby, a new front entrance here, a new set of bathrooms here, and then a new main sort of circulation corridor connecting to the galleries. And we will have this new flex gallery space up here that if we're able to build it as we hope will be about 4,100 square feet, so about 40% larger than our current one. Then this space here is currently our Front Range Rising History exhibit. It will become the new children's gallery, and then go down the corridor here to this space that will become our new permanent history gallery. We will open with the children's gallery and flex gallery, and then we will open the history gallery at some point later on, probably with sort of a long-term temporary exhibit while we continue fundraising to do a full, more in-depth and immersive history gallery.
And I know I asked this a long time ago, but is the shop getting any more space?
If, so there are two alternates that we are including in the expansion. One of them would be a expansion to the shop, and the other one is, and it's not really clearly called out, but it's basically adding on to the flex gallery. This drawing shows it with both of the alternates included. And that's just going to depend on funding and what the bids come back to do that. But we would add about 800 square feet of space onto the shop and about 900 square feet onto the back.
It's a little different.
Yeah.
plans for expanding or having a cafe. That's eliminated.
Yeah, both cost, and we did an analysis with a consultant on whether a cafe was really sustainable at our level of visitation. And they basically said, well, a cafe is probably what, if you wanted to provide food service, what you could do is have kind of a grab and go type counter. So there's certainly an option to do that if we find there's a lot of demand, because our gift shop will be larger. So refrigerator with some ready. Sure. We did actually stock some of those for a time in our gift shop, and really didn't find a lot of consumer demand for them. So our sense is we probably at least won't try that out immediately. But, yeah, just the cost and like the foot traffic just.
And how many square feet are we adding?
About 6,000.
6,000.
Between the gallery, bathrooms, hallway, and lobbies. We're also, I'll just note, we're doing a little bit of renovation backstage. So you see the door behind Sheila there. That door is not large enough to bring the piano through, which means if we ever need to use the piano anywhere other than the stage, we have to hire professionals to move it, and it's expensive, and then we have to get it retuned and all of that. So we'll be enlarging that door and enlarging the backstage area so it can be a little bit more of a green room for performers and things. But right now, any more than just a couple of performers, we have to use this space, which means we can't use the auditorium and the ex-officio at the same time. So, just kind of tweaking the space a little more efficient. Given that it's 5:30 and I don't really have the budget in quite as neat, presentable form as this, I will send out a budget so we can, and I'll put it on next month's agenda to go.
Do we have any other board comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Is there a second? I'll second. Okay.
We all second.
All in favor? Shockingly unanimous. We will call the meeting to an end at 5:31.